Hi. So this video is going to walk you through how to plan a full color image using 3 different color plates. So we won't necessarily use black on this image. I think I'm planning to just use the red, the yellow, and the blue, our primary colors. And it's going to take a little bit more careful planning. So this one I want you to think out an image where you're forcing the primary colors to overlap, where they will mix some secondary colors, and maybe also find a spot where you're mixing all 3 primary colors in one spot to see what happens there. So in some cases you might let the background be that area where all of the 3 colors mix. And if we decide later that this just is not reading clearly enough, we could add a black plate later. But for now, I'm hoping this just works out with the 3 primary colors. I'm also going to plan to leave an area that's white. So to plan out your sketch, what I would do is, carefully trace the size of your image. This is going to be a 6x8 so that it can fit on our normal Monotype plates. And then I'd like you to color code it. Now when you color code, I want you to choose just the primaries. Don't pull out your 72 color pack of Prismacolor pencils and start going crazy, because it's going to be very hard to mimic that many different colors using only 3 colors. So if you restrict yourself from the very beginning to the same colors of crayon that you plan to use ink later, then you'll be less likely to be disappointed in how the image comes out, because this is going to be a more accurate translation of how those colors will mix optically. So I've got colored pencils. If you have highlighters in the right colors, that works really well too. I would try to find a highlighter that's bright yellow, one that's the kind of light bluish green, and then if you have one that's kind of that magenta pink, that works really pretty well for our process red. So what I'm doing is I'm going to start color coding, and anywhere that I plan for 2 primaries to mix, I'm just going to hatch the colors over each other to kind of imitate what's going to happen when the colors are mixing by overprinting. So to start with, I'm going to pretend that this is like a yellow balloon. These are just supposed to be like balloon shapes. And so the yellow balloon will be this whole area. You don't need to be super careful as you're doing the coloring. It's just really so that you don't mess up later when you're trying to wipe the plates away in the right spot. So we're putting yellow here. That'll be this big kind of noodly shape. And then I'm going to have this balloon be the blue balloon. So it's going to overlap where the yellow is, as well as this whole bottom part and this little shape here. For the red areas, I wanted the red to be able to overlap the blue, so I had to add red in 2 different places in this composition. So this top balloon will be red, and I want these balloons to look like they're transparent, almost like they're made out of glass, so that we can see one balloon through the other balloon. And then this flag at the bottom will also be red. And it will go behind the yellow balloon, behind the behind the blue balloon, behind the yellow balloon, but also mix here, where the blue, the yellow, and the red are all going to mix in this one little triangular shape here. And then I think I'm also going to try to make one balloon just look white. So I'm not going to be mixing up a white ink. I'm just going to be wiping that area away on all 3 of the color plates, so that the white of the paper shows through in that area. So that'll be white. And then I think back here what I'm going to do is just let all the colors mix together back here as well. And I might do it in a little bit of a random way, so it's not just a flat color, but maybe I'll do a little bit of kind of selective wiping, so there's some variation back there. But overall, I'll plan to keep most of this part where the red plate goes. I haven't decided about the stick. I might try to make that a white, but we'll see. It would be kind of tricky to lift that out in exactly the same spot on all 3 color blocks, so I might change my mind as we go. And then let's imagine that the blue is also printing in that background area, mixing with the red. So it's much better to actually color these templates out instead of just giving yourself a letter coding, because often you'll make mistakes if you're just writing the letter Y or R or W in there. It's harder to translate that into the actual action of wiping the plate. So do color them in. It also helps me when I'm checking your sketches to know that you're to help you plan out which parts to wipe away for which areas. So I want to see it actually colored out like this when you submit sketches for me. And then let's assume the yellow also gets printed over the background area. So in this case, since I am mixing all the colors in the background, this little triangle may not be that critical anymore. I wasn't sure what I was going to end up doing in the background, but I think I will try to get some texture or something back there, so it might still look a little bit different than where they all mix in the balloon shapes. Okay, the other thing I'm thinking about now is because this little tiny, where you tie off the balloon, that little shape needs to be wiped out on all 4 balloons in exactly the same spot. So it makes me a little bit nervous. I'm debating whether to just try to suggest that here instead of there. But anyway, we'll go for it. It'll be a little bit of a challenge to try to get that tiny little shape to line up on all 4 or on all 3 plates. So we've got our color draft. Now we're going to be putting this underneath our templates, and the thing is, once we ink over it, it's going to be kind of hard to see the colors through the big thick layers of ink. So I also want to have a second one of these. I'm going to actually keep the color one where I can see it as I'm wiping, but I want to make an exact replica of this just in black and white so that I can see it through the layers of ink. So I'm going to tape this down for just a second while I'm transferring the image so that it doesn't shift around. And then I'm going to retrace it. So this paper that I'm using is thin enough I can see right through it and I could trace it, but if you didn't have a thin piece of paper like that and you were finding it hard to trace the shapes exactly, another thing that can be really helpful is this red transfer paper. So if you got a kit from me, the red transfer paper was in that kit. This is 2-sided red transfer paper, so it will actually, whatever you trace, it's going to put the tracing on the back of your sketch as well as on the sheet that you're tracing onto. So I think instead of, we'll show you that method as well. Let me actually reverse these around. So we'll put down the paper that we want the image to go onto. This got a little bit rumpled, but it still should work. You should be able to use this tracing paper many times before you throw it away. I've only given you each one sheet. They're $1 a sheet, so you don't really want to waste it. And I think I'll reverse where my tape is going here, so I'll pull that off and just tape across the top of the sheets again. And when you do the transfer, the finer the tip pen that you use, the more precise your lines are going to be. When I drew this one, I used a big fat Sharpie marker, but I want the lines on the actual guideline to be a little bit finer so that I know exactly where those lines need to be as I'm wiping the image out. So I'm going to press fairly firmly as I'm tracing these shapes so that it presses through to the other layer of drawing paper. And even tracing these little. The other nice thing about the 2-sided tracing paper is you can tell exactly what you've traced by just peeking at the back side of the key drawing and seeing if you have red marks on all of those lines. And then I also want to trace where the corners of the image are in case I need to find that point more than once. Alright, let's kind of peek and make sure the whole image got transferred. I might have missed a few contours. You can see the red lines here on the back of the original drawing, and we can check here as well. So we've got the corners marked off so we know right where to draw that rectangle, and I think we got all of the key contours. It's a pretty simple design. So hopefully I can see this red line work through my plexi plates as I'm inking them up, and I will go ahead and ink in this outer line again so it's a little bit easier to find if we're adding that window border to keep the ink off the borders of the paper, or if you're adding the strips of paper to block off the extra ink that gets rolled outside of that 6x8 rectangle. It should just help us find it a little bit easier. sometimes even extending these lines out a little bit farther. In case ink's covering it here, you can still find the lines a little further out on the plate if you're using the strips of newspaper to block out the border. So I'm going to extend those crosshairs even a little bit farther into the margins. And we'll be taping this right to the underside of our registration template. So let me see where I set that aside. I'm running out of space here, so everything's kind of all over the place. So this is the protective template that we were using on our paper. This was the paper that helps me know how large the image is going to be. I'm going to go ahead and tape this on as well so that I get the image centered on my printing paper. And I'm just going to kind of estimate to save a little bit of time. 3 fingers width. Okay. So I'll just tape it right to our little guideline that goes underneath our registration piece of plexi. And then we'll protect it with this coating so that we don't get ink on our template. If it turns out that it's too hard to see the red line through, I may have to peel this off and retrace that. But hopefully we'll be able to see our line work even through the ink. All right. So what we've got is I've taped the largest piece of paper, shows us where our printing paper will eventually, line up with. And then I've tried to center this image inside. Actually, it's a little bit off on the guide. I'll move it over a little bit before I print. I do want the margins to be pretty even on the within our plate size, so I'll fix that a little bit. But that's our basics. And then we'll have this nearby where it's not getting ink on it that we can use as a reference for which areas need to be lifted out on which plates. So that'll be our next step. I'm going to stop the video right here so I can clear away some things, and I'll start inking up the block. So what I'm going to be doing in preparation for the next demo is I'll be preparing 3 different plates, one for each color. I'm going to color code them with the color of ink that needs to go on each plate, and it's up to you if you want to draw the little rectangular shape on the same spot on each plate. You could easily do that by just stacking them neatly, retracing the rectangle on each of the 3 sheets so that when you put it on the block, it should be in line with your key image. I don't think that's as critical as long as we have the guidelines on our template for printing. So it's up to you. If you want to draw it on each plate just to be safe, you could do that. Otherwise, you can rely a little bit more on your printing template to help you know exactly where those shapes need to be. Let's stop there, and I'll see you in a few minutes for inking it up and printing it.